The Dunhuang manuscripts are not merely relics of the past, but silenced voices that, when finally heard, rewrite entire chapters of human history. R.L. Stine, explorer and archaeologist who first documented the discovery for the Western world. Imagine a cave sealed for nearly 1,000 years, hidden in the depths of the Gobi Desert, guarding over 50,000 documents that remained untouched since the 11th century. This is not the beginning of a work of fiction, but the extraordinary true story of the Dunhuang manuscripts, perhaps the greatest literary and artistic treasure ever found on the Silk Road. In 1901, a Taoist monk named Wang Yuanlu was carrying out restoration work at the Mogao Caves, a complex of rock-cut temples near the city of Dunhuang in northwestern China. During the works, he noticed a crack in one of the walls. Upon investigating, he discovered a hidden chamber, sealed since the early 11th century. What he found inside would leave the academic world in a state of shock for the next 100 years. The chamber, known today as Cave 17 Library, contained an impressive collection of manuscripts, silk paintings, embroideries, and documents in more than 20 different languages, including Chinese, Tibetan, Sanskrit, Sogdian, Uyghur, Hebrew, and even an extinct language called Khotanese. Dated primarily between the 5th and 10th centuries, these documents offer an unprecedented glimpse into life, culture, and spirituality along the ancient Silk Road. But why were these texts sealed away? This is the first layer of the enigma surrounding the Dunhuang manuscripts. The most accepted theory suggests that monks from the local monastery hid the manuscripts during a period of political instability, possibly during the invasion of the Tanguts, a nomadic people from the north, around the year 1015. They would have sealed the chamber to protect the sacred texts from destruction, intending to retrieve them when the danger had passed. However, for unknown reasons, the cave remained forgotten for almost a millennium. What makes this discovery particularly significant is that many of these texts were considered lost or were never known to the modern world. Among them are the world's earliest printed examples, predating the Gutenberg Bible by almost 500 years. There is also the oldest complete star map known, dated to the year 760, showing surprisingly advanced astronomical knowledge for the time. The story of the dispersal of these manuscripts around the world is almost as fascinating as their content. After the discovery, Wang Yuanlu, without fully understanding the historical value of the find, sold large quantities of the manuscripts to foreign explorers for trivial prices. British archaeologist R.L. Stine was the first Westerner to visit the site in 1907, followed by Frenchman Paul Pelliot in 1908. Both acquired thousands of documents that today are housed in the British Museum, the National Library of France, and the British Library. The Chinese government, upon learning of the situation, quickly intervened to preserve what remained. Today, the manuscripts are dispersed in institutions around the world, including the National Library of China in Beijing, the Institute of Oriental Manuscripts in St. Petersburg, and the Library of Congress in the United States. The study of these documents has revolutionized our understanding of Central Asian history. They reveal a Silk Road that was far more diverse and cosmopolitan than previously imagined, where different religions, cultures, and languages coexisted and influenced each other. Buddhism, Taoism, Nestorian Christianity, Judaism, Manichaeism, and Zoroastrianism, all these traditions left their mark on the Dunhuang manuscripts. But what do these ancient texts still conceal? What secrets remain encoded in languages that few modern scholars can fully decipher? Among the thousands of documents found at Dunhuang, perhaps the most valuable are the Buddhist texts. The cave revealed some of the earliest known copies of Buddhist sutras, including versions that differ significantly from texts that survived in other parts of Asia. These variations have sparked intense debates among scholars about the evolution of Buddhism as it traveled from India to China and beyond. One of the most extraordinary manuscripts is the Diamond Sutra, dated to the year 868. This is not only an important religious text, but also the world's oldest dated printed book. Produced almost 600 years before the Gutenberg Bible, this scroll, nearly 5 meters long, was created using carved wooden blocks, a revolutionary printing technique for the time. The colophon of the document indicates that it was reverently made for universal distribution by Wang Ji in memory of his parents. This simple act of filial devotion resulted in the preservation of a milestone in the history of human communication. Another fascinating text is the Sutra of Perfect Wisdom, one of the most important works of Mahayana Buddhism. The version found at Dunhuang contains marginal comments and annotations that reveal how practitioners interpreted and applied these teachings in their daily lives. These personal notes offer a unique window into the minds of medieval Buddhist practitioners, humanizing texts that might otherwise seem purely theoretical or philosophical. But the Dunhuang manuscripts go far beyond religious texts. The cave also contained secular documents that illuminate aspects of daily life rarely preserved in historical records. Marriage contracts, tax records, medical recipes, calligraphy manuals, school books, and even personal letters were found among the cave's treasures. A particularly touching document is a letter from a mother to her son who had left to study in a distant city, expressing her concern and love in a way that resonates across the centuries. The manuscripts also include literary texts that had been lost for a long time. Among them, poems from the Tang dynasty that did not survive in any other source, including works by Li Bai and Du Fu, considered the greatest poets in Chinese history. Some of these poems reveal unknown facets of these celebrated authors, such as more direct social criticism or personal reflections that do not appear in their canonized works. One of the most intriguing aspects of the collection are texts that document syncretic religious practices. A notable example is the Jesus Sutra, a text that presents Nestorian Christian teachings in Buddhist language and concepts. This extraordinary document demonstrates how Christianity was adapted to become comprehensible and appealing to Chinese audiences in the 8th century. It describes Jesus as a Buddha from the West and reinterprets Christian concepts using Buddhist terminology. Equally fascinating are the Jewish manuscripts found in the cave, written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Judeo-Persian. These documents, including fragments of the Torah and liturgical prayers, provide evidence of thriving Jewish communities along the Silk Road, much earlier than previously believed. They reveal a Jewish community that maintained its traditions while integrating into local cultures, adopting Chinese names and actively participating in regional trade. The Dunhuang manuscripts also contain some of the earliest known examples of notated music. Scores for instruments such as the pipa, a type of Chinese lute, and the guqin, Chinese zither, offer musicologists the opportunity to reconstruct melodies that have not been heard for more than 1,000 years. Some of these musical manuscripts include not only notations, but also detailed instructions on performance techniques and performance contexts. Among the most enigmatic documents are those written in languages that remain partially undeciphered, such as Tangut and Khotanese. These texts represent some of the only surviving sources of these extinct languages, offering linguists valuable clues about the linguistic diversity of the region. Each advance in deciphering these manuscripts has the potential to reveal completely new information about civilizations that would otherwise have been forgotten by time. What do these texts reveal about the true nature of cultural exchanges on the ancient Silk Road? And what still remains hidden in the languages we have only begun to decipher? Beyond their textual content, the Dunhuang manuscripts are masterpieces of art and craftsmanship. Many of the scrolls contain stunning illustrations executed with mineral and vegetable pigments that have maintained their vividness for more than 1,000 years. These paintings were not mere adornments, but visual tools for understanding complex spiritual concepts, especially for the illiterate. The silk paintings found in the cave are among the oldest and best-preserved examples of Chinese Buddhist art. One of the most impressive is the Paradise of Amitabha Buddha, a 9th-century painting that depicts in exuberant detail the Pure Land, the Western paradise where devotees aspired to be reborn. Nearly 2 meters tall, this work uses a palette of vibrant colors, deep blues, vivid reds, and resplendent golds, to create a celestial vision of extraordinary complexity. The artists who created these works did not sign their work, remaining anonymous according to the Buddhist tradition of detachment from ego. However, through stylistic analyses, scholars have been able to identify distinct schools of painters, each with its own techniques and aesthetic preferences. Some paintings show influences from Persian and Indian art, evidencing the cultural exchange that occurred along the Silk Road. The production process of these manuscripts was extremely laborious. Paper was made from plant fibers, mainly mulberry bark, hemp, or bamboo, which were macerated, boiled, and then sieved into thin sheets. Ink was produced from soot or lamp black mixed with animal glue. Brushes were made with rabbit, goat, or other animal hair tied to bamboo stems. Each manuscript represented a significant investment of resources and specialized labor. The preservation of these organic materials for more than 1,000 years is a remarkable phenomenon. The exceptionally dry climate of the Gobi Desert, combined with the constant darkness of the sealed cave, created ideal conditions for conservation. The stable temperature inside the cave also helped prevent deterioration of pigments and paper. This accidental preservation provides us with an unprecedented glimpse of the past, as if we had opened a time capsule. The Dunhuang Manuscripts also contain some of the earliest known examples of scientific maps. The Dunhuang Star Map, dated to the year 760, is the oldest complete celestial atlas in the world. It shows 1,339 stars grouped into 257 constellations, with a precision that impresses modern astronomers. This map not only demonstrates the advanced astronomical knowledge of Tang China, but also served as a tool for navigation, agriculture, and religious rituals. Another notable scientific document is an illustrated medical treatise that details acupuncture points and energy meridians of the human body. This manuscript includes some of the earliest known anatomical representations in Chinese medicine, with precise annotations on the treatment of various diseases. It reveals that physicians of the time already possessed sophisticated knowledge of the human body and its functions, even without the benefit of systematic dissection that underpinned Western medicine. The manuscripts also include mathematical treatises that demonstrate advanced calculation methods, including the use of what we would now call algebra to solve practical problems in engineering, astronomy, and commerce. A particularly interesting document contains mathematical problems formulated as narrative puzzles, suggesting they were used in teaching young students, a precursor to the modern word problems that still torment mathematics students. The linguistic diversity of the manuscripts presents unique challenges for modern scholars. Some documents are bilingual or even multilingual, with interlinear translations that provide valuable clues for deciphering less-known languages. For example, texts in Sanskrit with Tibetan translations have helped linguists better understand both languages and the evolution of their writing systems. The manuscripts also reveal fascinating information about the translation techniques used by ancient scholars. Marginal notes show how translators struggled to find Chinese equivalents for Indian Buddhist concepts, sometimes creating neologisms or adapting existing terms. These annotations offer insights into the process of cultural and religious transmission across linguistic barriers. Modern scientific analysis of the manuscripts continues to reveal new information. Techniques such as Raman spectroscopy and X-ray fluorescence allow researchers to identify the precise chemical composition of inks and pigments without damaging the documents. Multispectral imaging can reveal erased or overlaid texts, recovering information that seemed lost forever. DNA sequencing extracted from paper and parchment can even identify the exact species of plants and animals used in the production of the manuscripts. What other scientific and artistic secrets still await discovery in the pages of these millennial manuscripts? And how might future technologies help us unravel their deepest mysteries? To fully understand the significance of the Dunhuang manuscripts, we must examine the historical context in which they were created and preserved. The city of Dunhuang was not just any location, but a crucial nexus on the ancient Silk Road, the vast system of trade routes that connected east to west for more than 2,000 years. Situated at the western end of the Hexi corridor, Dunhuang was the last oasis before travelers faced either the dreaded Taklamakan Desert to the west or the Gobi Desert to the north. This strategic position transformed the city into a meeting point for merchants, pilgrims, diplomats, and adventurers from all parts of the known world. It was literally the point where East met West, long before that phrase became a cliché. During the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907, the period when many of the manuscripts were produced, China was experiencing a golden age characterized by political stability, economic prosperity, and extraordinary cultural openness. The capital Chang'an, present-day Xi'an, was the largest and most cosmopolitan city in the world, housing communities of Sogdians, Persians, Arabs, Indians, Koreans, Japanese, and many other peoples. This unprecedented openness allowed ideas, technologies, and beliefs to flow freely across cultural boundaries. Buddhism, which had reached China centuries earlier, flourished during this period, with monasteries and temples being built throughout the empire. The Mogao Caves at Dunhuang, where the manuscripts were discovered, are a monumental testimony to this Buddhist flourishing, with hundreds of caves carved into the rock and decorated with stunning statues and frescoes. However, this golden age would not last forever. In the year 842, a rebellion led by a general named Anlushan nearly destroyed the Tang dynasty. Although eventually suppressed, the rebellion permanently weakened the central government and initiated a long period of decline. The frontier provinces, including the Dunhuang region, became increasingly autonomous. By the end of the 9th century, Tang control over Dunhuang had virtually disappeared. The region fell under the rule of the Guyi Kingdom, a buffer state that maintained its independence by skillfully playing neighboring powers against each other. It was during this period of political uncertainty that many of the manuscripts were copied and preserved, possibly as a way to protect sacred knowledge in turbulent times. The 10th century brought new challenges to the region. The Tibetan Empire, which had been a formidable power during the 8th century, was in decline, while new powers emerged from the northern steppes. Among these were the Tanguts, a people of Tibeto-Burman origin who would eventually establish the powerful Western Xia state. It was probably during the Tangut expansion in the early 11th century that the monks of Dunhuang decided to seal the cave library. Evidence suggests that this act was performed with great care and reverence. The manuscripts were methodically organized, with the most important Buddhist texts placed in positions of honor. The cave entrance was then carefully sealed and camouflaged with a fresco, making it virtually indistinguishable from the surrounding rock wall. In the centuries that followed, Dunhuang would witness the rise and fall of numerous empires. Genghis Khan's Mongols swept through the region in the 13th century, followed by the Ming dynasty in the 14th century, and the Manchus of the Qing dynasty in the 17th century. Throughout this time, the secret library remained untouched, its contents preserved by the desert's dry climate and the cave's isolation. The 19th century brought a new wave of interest in Central Asia, this time from European colonial powers. Great Britain and Russia engaged in what became known as the Great Game, a geopolitical competition for control of the region. Explorers, spies, and archaeologists traversed the Silk Road in search of antiquities and strategic information. It was in this context of imperial rivalry that the Dunhuang manuscripts were rediscovered and subsequently dispersed around the world. The acquisition of large quantities of these documents by foreign explorers, such as Aurel Stein and Paul Pelliot, is viewed today by many Chinese as a painful episode of cultural spoliation, comparable to the looting of the Summer Palace in Beijing or the removal of the Elgin marbles from Greece. This history of dispersal raises important questions about cultural ownership and repatriation that remain relevant today. Who should be the guardian of these priceless treasures? The Western institutions that have preserved them for more than a century? Or China, their country of origin? And how can we balance the legitimate demands of national heritage with the ideal of universal cultural heritage? What do the Dunhuang manuscripts teach us about the cycles of power, knowledge, and forgetting in human history? And how does their modern rediscovery reflect the continuing patterns of exchange and conflict between East and West? Despite more than a century of intensive study, the Dunhuang manuscripts continue to guard secrets and generate controversies. Various alternative theories have emerged to explain enigmatic aspects of the collection, some challenging the conventional narrative about their origin and purpose. One of the most intriguing questions is, why was the cave sealed with such care, only to be abandoned for almost 1,000 years? The traditional explanation that the manuscripts were hidden to protect them from invaders doesn't fully explain why nobody returned to retrieve them when the danger passed. Some scholars propose a more radical theory, that the cave was not an emergency repository, but a Buddhist geniza, a ritual burial site for sacred texts that could not be destroyed but had become too damaged or obsolete for continued use. This theory is supported by the eclectic composition of the collection, which includes texts from different periods, traditions, and qualities. Many of the manuscripts show signs of extensive use, with worn and repaired pages. Others contain copyist errors that would have made them improper for use in ceremonies. The practice of respectfully burying sacred texts is well documented in Judaism and also exists in other religious traditions. If this theory is correct, the cave library would not be a hidden treasure awaiting recovery, but a dead archive deliberately sealed for eternity. Another controversial theory involves the presence of texts considered heretical or politically subversive. Some of the manuscripts contain tantric Buddhist teachings that were viewed with suspicion by more conservative religious authorities. Others include apocalyptic prophecies that could be interpreted as criticisms of the imperial government. Was the library sealed not to protect the texts from external invaders, but to hide them from internal censors? Professor Rong Xinjiang of Peking University has proposed a more prosaic but equally fascinating theory. Based on administrative documents found in the cave itself, he suggests that the library was originally the archive of a local monastery that was gradually abandoned as Dunhuang's importance as a trading center diminished. The sealing of the cave would have been simply the final act of monks who were relocating their center of activities to another site, preserving documents they couldn't take with them, but that were too sacred to destroy. One of the most enigmatic aspects of the manuscripts is the presence of texts in languages that remain partially undeciphered. Tangut, for example, was the official language of the Western Xia Empire, which controlled parts of northwestern China between the 11th and 13th centuries. Although its script has been partially deciphered, many aspects of its grammar and vocabulary remain obscure. The Dunhuang Manuscripts in Tangut offer valuable clues, but also raise new questions about the relationship of this mysterious people with their neighbors. Equally intriguing are the manuscripts in Khotanese, an Eastern Iranian language spoken in the Kingdom of Khotan, present-day Xinjiang, China, until approximately the 11th century. Before the discovery of the Dunhuang manuscripts, this language was virtually unknown. The Khotanese texts include not only translations of Buddhist sutras, but also secular and literary documents that offer glimpses of a sophisticated culture that completely disappeared after the Muslim conquest of the region. Some of the manuscripts contain what appear to be deliberate codes or cipher writings. A notable example is a document known as the Bird Script Manuscript, which uses stylized bird-shaped characters. Although initially considered a calligraphic exercise or a purely decorative text, recent analyses suggest it may be a form of esoteric writing used to transmit secret teachings within certain Buddhist schools. Another mystery involves chronological discrepancies in some of the documents. Certain manuscripts contain information that seems anachronistic, references to events or people that, according to other historical sources, belong to different periods. These inconsistencies have led some researchers to question the reliability of conventional dating methods, or to suggest that some texts may be ancient forgeries created to establish the antiquity and authority of certain religious traditions. The presence of Jewish manuscripts in Dunhuang also raises fascinating questions. How did a substantial Jewish community come to be established so far from their traditional centers in the Middle East? The documents suggest connections with Persian Jewish communities, but also show unique adaptations to the Chinese cultural environment. Some scholars speculate that these Jews may have been descendants of merchants or refugees who traveled the Silk Road after the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem in the year 70 CE. Perhaps the most mysterious aspect of the manuscripts is what they don't contain. Notably absent are detailed references to certain esoteric practices that we know were important in some Buddhist traditions. This absence has led to speculation that there may have been a deliberate selection of texts included in the library, with the most secret teachings being transmitted only orally or preserved in another location yet to be discovered. What else might be hidden in the depths of the Gobi Desert? And what other literary and artistic treasures of the Silk Road await rediscovery? In the digital world of the 21st century, the Dunhuang manuscripts are experiencing a remarkable renaissance. Thanks to ambitious digitization projects, these ancient texts are now accessible to scholars and enthusiasts around the world. The International Dunhuang Project, a collaboration between institutions in China, Europe, Japan, and the United States, has already digitized more than 40,000 manuscripts, creating a virtual archive that transcends political and geographical boundaries. This unprecedented accessibility is democratizing the study of the manuscripts. While previously only specialists with access to physical collections could examine the documents, now independent researchers, students, and even interested amateurs can study high-resolution images online. This openness has already resulted in new discoveries and interpretations, as fresh eyes examine texts that remained obscure for decades. Artificial intelligence technologies are transforming the study of the manuscripts. Character recognition algorithms can now process thousands of pages of ancient text, identifying patterns and connections that would escape human perception. Machine learning systems are being trained to assist in deciphering little-known languages, comparing multilingual texts to identify correspondences and grammatical patterns. These tools do not replace human expertise, but enormously amplify its effectiveness. The study of the manuscripts is also influencing our understanding of global history. The traditional Eurocentric view of the Silk Road as a one-way street through which civilization flowed from west to east has been fundamentally challenged. The manuscripts reveal a medieval world that was far more interconnected and multicultural than previously imagined, with ideas, technologies, and beliefs circulating in multiple directions. This historical revision has significant contemporary implications. In the context of China's Belt and Road Initiative, also known as the New Silk Road, the Dunhuang manuscripts are often cited as evidence of an ancient tradition of peaceful and mutually beneficial exchange between China and its neighbors. They have become symbols of a shared past that can inform future relationships. At the same time, the manuscripts continue to generate debates about cultural ownership and repatriation. In 2019, Chinese President Xi Jinping made an explicit call for the return of Chinese cultural artifacts held abroad, including the Dunhuang manuscripts. Institutions such as the British Museum and the National Library of France face increasing pressure to consider returning these treasures, or at least to establish more equitable partnerships with Chinese institutions. Beyond these political issues, the manuscripts have a profound cultural and spiritual impact. They have inspired contemporary artists, writers, and musicians. Composer Tan Dun created a symphony based on melodies reconstructed from Dunhuang musical notations. Novelists like Lisa C. have woven the manuscripts into historical fiction that brings the Silk Road to life for modern readers. Contemporary calligraphers and painters continue to study and emulate the artistic styles preserved in the manuscripts. For Buddhist practitioners, the Dunhuang texts offer direct access to teachings and practices that might otherwise have been lost. Some of the meditation techniques described in the manuscripts are being revived in modern Buddhist communities, creating a living connection with practitioners who lived more than 1,000 years ago. The manuscripts serve as a reminder that spiritual traditions are not static, but evolve through continuous dialogue between past and present. The manuscripts also provide valuable lessons about cultural preservation in our own time. The accidental preservation of the Dunhuang Library raises questions about what we choose to preserve for future generations and how we do it. In an age of digital fragility, where data formats become obsolete within decades, the 1,000-year survival of these paper documents offers a humbling perspective on our assumptions about permanence and legacy. Perhaps the most profound lesson of the Dunhuang manuscripts is about human interconnectedness. They reveal a world where cultures we often think of as separate and distinct, Chinese, Indian, Persian, Tibetan, Turkic, were in constant dialogue, borrowing and adapting ideas from each other. The manuscripts challenge our modern notions of cultural purity and national identity, showing that hybridity and exchange have always been the engines of human creativity. As we continue to study and preserve these remarkable documents, we are not merely engaging with the past, but participating in an ongoing conversation across time. Each new generation brings fresh questions and perspectives to these ancient texts, finding in them reflections of their own concerns and aspirations. In this way, the Dunhuang manuscripts remain living documents, their meanings continuously evolving as they encounter new minds and new historical circumstances. What will future generations discover in these texts that we have overlooked? And what treasures of our own time will survive to speak to the distant future as the voices of Dunhuang now speak to us?